I found out my brother is actually my dad. I never questioned my family. My mother raised me alone, and my older brother, Jake, was always there, looking out for me. He was 17 years older, more like an uncle than a brother, but I never thought twice about it. We were close, despite the age gap. But everything changed on my 18th birthday. It started with a simple gift, an Ancestry DNA kit. My best friend Lily had gotten one for herself, and she thought it would be fun if I did it too. Maybe you'll find some long-lost cousin or something, she joked. I laughed and swabbed my cheek, never expecting anything shocking. A few weeks later, the results arrived. That's when my world shattered. I scrolled through my matches, my eyes skimming past distant relatives, until I saw one name that shouldn't have been there. Jake. But it didn't say brother. It said parent. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking. That had to be a mistake. Jake was my brother, not my dad. That was impossible. Unless I couldn't breathe. My heart pounded as memories flooded my mind. Times when Jake acted more like a father than a sibling. The way he protected me, how he'd been the one to show up to my school plays when Mom had to work. The way he always seemed extra invested in my future. I needed answers. I stormed into the living room where Jake was watching TV, completely unaware that his secret was about to unravel. Jake, I said, my voice unsteady. We need to talk. He looked up at me, instantly sensing something was wrong. What's up? I shoved my phone in front of him. Explain this. His face drained of color. For a long moment, he just stared, his fingers tightening around the phone. Then he exhaled shakily, rubbing his face with his hands. I was hoping you'd never find out, he murmured. I took a step back. So it's true? My voice cracked. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a pain I'd never seen before. Yes, I'm your father. The room spun. My knees felt weak, and I had to steady myself against the arm of the couch. My brother, the person I'd trusted my entire life, was actually my dad? I shook my head. Number, that doesn't make sense. You're my brother. You've always been my brother. Jake, or should I say Dad, ran a hand through his hair, his jaw tight. I know, and I'm so sorry. I never wanted you to find out this way. Then how was I supposed to find out? My voice cracked, emotions crashing over me. Were you ever going to tell me? His eyes darted toward the hallway as if he expected Mom to come running out. But she wasn't here. She was working late, like always. It was just the two of us. Jake sighed. I don't even know where to start. Start with the truth, I demanded. He hesitated, then gestured for me to sit. I didn't want to, but my legs felt like jelly, so I dropped onto the couch. He sat beside me, staring at his hands. I was 17 when your mom got pregnant. He began, his voice low. We were both kids, scared out of our minds. Our parents, your grandparents, were furious. They didn't want the shame of their teenage son having a kid, so they came up with a plan. My stomach twisted. What plan? They told us that your mom should raise you as her child, and that I would be your big brother. He exhaled sharply. They thought it would be easier for everyone. They didn't want people judging us, and we went along with it. I shook my head, trying to make sense of it. So Mom lied to me my whole life? You lied to me? Jake flinched. I did what I thought was best. You were just a baby. By the time you were old enough to understand, I didn't know how to tell you. And the longer I waited, the harder it got. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. So my whole life has been a lie. No, Jake said firmly. Everything I've done for you, all the times I helped with homework, took care of you when you were sick, taught you how to ride a bike, that was real. I am your family no matter what. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Does anyone else know? He hesitated. Your mom. Our parents knew before they passed, but no one else. My head throbbed. So you just plan to take this secret to the grave? Jake's eyes softened. I was afraid you'd hate me. I looked at him, this man I'd called my brother my whole life. And for the first time, I saw someone different. Not a sibling, but a scared teenager who had once been forced to make an impossible choice. I didn't know how to feel. I didn't know what to do. But I did know one thing. Nothing would ever be the same again. Silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at Jake. My dad. The word felt foreign, wrong even. I need to talk to Mom. My voice was barely above a whisper. Jake stiffened. She's working late tonight. Maybe you should wait. No. I shot up from the couch. I'm not waiting. I need answers. From her. Before he could stop me, I grabbed my keys and stormed out. The cold night air hit me like a slap, but I didn't care. My thoughts were racing too fast, my emotions swinging between anger, confusion, and betrayal. By the time I reached the small diner where my mom worked, my hands were shaking. I pushed through the glass door, the bell jingling above me. The scent of coffee and fried food filled the air, but my stomach was too twisted to care. Mom was behind the counter, laughing with a customer, like she wasn't carrying the biggest secret of my life. Like she hadn't lied to me for 18 years. I marched up to her, my pulse pounding in my ears. We need to talk. Now. Her smile faltered. Sweetheart? What's wrong? Don't do that, I snapped. Don't act like everything's normal. She frowned, glancing around at the customers. Can we talk outside? I didn't even answer. I just turned and walked out, my body trembling with adrenaline. A moment later, she followed, rubbing her arms against the chill. What's going on? She asked gently. I looked her in the eye, my voice shaking. Is Jake my father? Her breath caught. In that split second, I saw it. The flash of guilt, the way her fingers tightened around her apron. And that was all I needed. Oh my God. I staggered back. It's true. She closed her eyes for a moment, then exhaled. Yes. My whole body went numb. Even though I already knew the truth, hearing it from her made it real. Why didn't you tell me? My voice cracked. Tears welled in her eyes. Because I thought I was protecting you. By lying to me? I let out a bitter laugh. Do you even understand what this feels like? My entire life, my identity, was a lie. She stepped closer, but I moved back. We were young, she pleaded. Scared. My parents, his parents, they told us this was the best way, that it would be easier for you if Jake was just your brother. Easier for me? Or for you? My chest tightened. Did you ever think about how this would feel when I found out? Did you ever plan on telling me? She wiped at her eyes. I don't know. Maybe one day. But then the years passed and it got harder. I scoffed. That's exactly what Jake said. At the mention of his name, something in her expression changed. Did you confront him first? I crossed my arms. Yeah, he told me everything. She let out a shaky breath. I know this is a lot, and I know you're angry, but please don't hate him. He's always loved you. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I don't hate him, but I don't know how to look at either of you right now. She nodded slowly, her face full of pain. I understand. I took a step back, the cold biting through my skin. I need time. Then I turned and walked away, my mind spinning, my heart aching. I had a father. And he wasn't the person I thought he was. I barely remembered driving home. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, emotions tangling into a knot so tight I couldn't breathe. The streetlights blurred past, and by the time I pulled into the driveway, my hands were still shaking. Jake, Dad, was waiting on the porch, his face tense. As soon as I stepped out of the car, he stood. You talked to her. It wasn't a question. I nodded stiffly. Yeah. His jaw tightened. And? I crossed my arms, fighting back the lump in my throat. She told me the same thing you did. That you were young, scared, that our grandparents forced this lie on us. I let out a sharp breath. But that doesn't change the fact that both of you went along with it. He ran a hand through his hair, looking down. I know, and I don't expect you to forgive me overnight. I scoffed. I don't even know if I can forgive you. Jake flinched, but he nodded. That's fair. I exhaled shakily. I need to know everything. Not just the parts you think I can handle. Everything. For a moment, he hesitated. Then, finally, he gestured toward the porch. Come inside. I followed him into the house, my heart pounding as I sat on the couch. He sat across from me, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. There's more, isn't there? I whispered. He swallowed hard. Yes. My stomach twisted. What else are you hiding? He hesitated, staring at the floor like he was gathering the courage to say what came next. Then he looked up, his expression haunted. It wasn't just about the shame of teenage pregnancy, he admitted. There was another reason we kept it a secret. A chill ran through me. What do you mean? He exhaled slowly. Your mom's parents, your grandparents, gave her an ultimatum. She could either let me raise you as her brother or... His voice broke for a second before he forced the words out. Or they'd force her to give you up for adoption. My entire body froze. What? I whispered. They didn't want the embarrassment, Jake said bitterly. They told her she had two choices. Either we went along with their plan, or they'd make sure she never got to keep you at all. I felt sick. I had spent the whole night angry, feeling betrayed by the people I trusted most. But now I realized how much worse it could have been. I could have grown up with strangers. I might have never known either of them. Oh my God, I murmured. Jake's eyes were glassy, but he didn't let the tears fall. I know it doesn't make this right. I know he still lied to you, but please believe me when I say, we did it because we loved you. I sat back, staring at the ceiling, trying to breathe past the lump in my throat. Everything still felt like a lie. But now, instead of anger, there was something else. Something like understanding. Something like heartbreak. I had no idea where we'd go from here. But for the first time since I read that DNA test, I wasn't sure if I could blame them anymore. The weight of Jake's confession pressed down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I had spent hours feeling betrayed, angry, like my whole life had been a lie. But now all I could feel was the crushing reality of what could have happened. I could have been taken away, adopted by strangers, never knowing Jake, never knowing my mom, never knowing who I was. I buried my face in my hands, my mind spinning. Why didn't you just tell me sooner? Jake sighed, rubbing his hands together. Because we were afraid. Afraid you'd hate us, afraid you wouldn't understand. Afraid of what it would do to you. His voice lowered. And maybe we were afraid of what it would do to us too. I swallowed hard, lifting my gaze to his. Did you ever want to tell me? He nodded immediately. Yes, so many times. He let out a humorless laugh. Every time I watched you blow out your birthday candles, every time I sat in the crowd at your school plays, every time I saw you struggling with something and wanted to say, I'm your dad, I'm here. I wanted to tell you. His voice cracked. But I was a coward. A lump formed in my throat. I had spent the last 24 hours seeing Jake as a liar. But now, I saw something else. A 17-year-old kid, terrified and forced to hide the biggest truth of his life. A young man watching his daughter grow up, pretending to be something he wasn't. A father who had been protecting me in the only way he knew how. I didn't know how to feel. I didn't know how to forgive. But I did know one thing. I needed time. I stood slowly, my legs weak. I can't do this right now. Jake's expression fell. I understand. I turned toward the door, but before I left, I hesitated. Then, without looking back, I whispered, I don't hate you. Then I walked out. The next few days passed in a blur. I barely spoke to Jake. Or Dad. My mom gave me space, sensing I wasn't ready to talk. Lily, my best friend, tried to be supportive, but even she didn't know what to say. Then, one night, I found myself scrolling through my phone, staring at my DNA test results again. That one word, parent, was still there, staring back at me like it was mocking my entire existence. I sighed, rubbing my temples. Then, without thinking, I clicked on Jake's profile. That's when I saw it, a section I hadn't paid attention to before. Something about health risks and genetic traits. I scrolled through his information, my eyes skimming over harmless details. Then I froze. A single line sent ice through my veins. Carrier of a hereditary heart condition. My fingers tightened around the phone. My mind raced back to every time I had seen Jake rubbing his chest absent-mindedly, every time he had gotten out of breath too easily. Had he known? Had he kept this from me too? I jumped up, grabbing my keys. I had told myself I needed space, that I wasn't ready to talk to him again. But now, I needed answers. And I needed them now. The whole drive to Jake's house, my hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My heart pounded in my chest, but this time it wasn't just from anger or confusion. It was fear. I burst through the front door without knocking. Jake was in the kitchen, drinking a glass of water, but nearly dropped it when he saw me. Jesus, you scared me, he muttered, setting the glass down. Then, when he noticed the look on my face, his expression turned serious. What's wrong? I lifted my phone, my fingers trembling as I turned the screen toward him. This. His eyes flicked to the DNA report. The second he read it, his face paled. I saw the test results, Jake. My voice wavered, but I forced myself to keep going. You have a hereditary heart condition. Did you know about this? Jake inhaled sharply, then let the breath out slowly. He ran a hand through his hair, his jaw tightening. It's not as bad as it sounds. That's not an answer. My chest constricted. Did you know? He hesitated. Then, finally, he nodded. Yeah, I've known for a while. I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. And you didn't think to tell me? After everything, you still kept secrets from me? He sighed, rubbing his temples. It's not like that. Then what is it like? My voice cracked. Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like that. Jake leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. I didn't want you to worry. I let out a bitter laugh. So instead, I find out through a DNA test? I shook my head. I had the right to know, Jake. Not just because I'm your daughter, but because this could affect me too. His expression softened. I know. I should have told you. I didn't want to make this harder for you. I swallowed hard, my anger fading into something else. Something more terrifying. How bad is it? He hesitated. I have a heart condition called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. The word sounded foreign, medical, like something I wasn't prepared to hear. It means the walls of my heart are thicker than normal, he explained. It can make it harder for my heart to pump blood. In some cases, it can lead to complications. Complications? I echoed. Jake's jaw tensed. Like heart failure. A cold chill ran down my spine. Heart failure. I shook my head. No, you're young, there has to be something they can do. Medication, surgery. I'm managing it. He cut in. I see a doctor regularly. I take medication. It's under control. But for how long? I whispered. Jake sighed, his face heavy with exhaustion. I don't know. The reality of it crashed into me like a wave. I had just found out the truth about Jake, about who he really was, about the fact that he had been my father all along. And now I was faced with the possibility that I could lose him. My legs felt weak, so I sank into a chair. Is this why you never told me? Because you thought one day you'd just be gone? Jake flinched, but he didn't deny it. I didn't want you to grow up worrying about losing me. I swallowed the lump in my throat. But now I am worrying about it. He sat across from me, his voice softer now. I'm not going anywhere. I promise. But the way he said it, like he wanted to believe it but wasn't sure he could, it scared me more than anything. Jake's promise echoed in my mind long after I left his house. I'm not going anywhere. But the way he said it didn't feel like a promise. It felt like a hope, a fragile, uncertain hope. And that terrified me. Days passed, then weeks. Things between Jake and me weren't perfect, but we were trying. I was trying. The truth still weighed on me, but so did something else. The fear of losing him. I started paying attention to things I never noticed before. The way he sometimes rubbed his chest absent-mindedly. The way he got winded after climbing the stairs. Every time I saw it, dread curled in my stomach. Then, one night, my worst fear came true. I was in my room when my phone rang. Mom. I picked up instantly, but the second I heard her voice, my blood turned to ice. It's Jake, she choked out. He collapsed. The paramedics are taking him to the hospital. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. What? They think it's his heart. I didn't hear anything else. I grabbed my keys and ran. By the time I got to the hospital, my mom was already there, pacing the waiting room. She turned the moment she saw me, her eyes red and swollen. They're still with him, she whispered. My knees nearly buckled. Is he... I couldn't finish the sentence. They got his heart beating again, but it was bad, she said, her voice breaking. They don't know if... She squeezed her eyes shut. If he'll wake up. I sank into a chair, my whole body numb. This couldn't be happening. I had just found out the truth. We had barely started fixing things. He couldn't just... A doctor walked in, and we both jumped to our feet. He's stable, she said, but unconscious. I exhaled shakily. You can see him now. The sight of Jake in that hospital bed nearly destroyed me. Wires, monitors, beeping machines. It didn't feel real. I sat beside him, gripping his hand, my throat tight. You promised, I whispered. You said you weren't going anywhere. He didn't move. Tears slipped down my face. I was mad at you for lying, for keeping secrets, but none of that matters anymore. My voice shook. I don't care about the past, Jake. I just need you to wake up. The machines beeped steadily. No response. I squeezed his hand tighter. Dad, I whispered. It was the first time I had ever called him that. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, his fingers twitched. The beeping changed slightly. I sucked in a breath, my heart pounding. Then, slowly, painfully, his eyes opened. He blinked a few times before his gaze landed on me. And for the first time, I saw it. Pure, unfiltered love. A father looking at his daughter. A small, weak smile tugged at his lips. His voice was hoarse, barely audible. You called me Dad. A sob broke out of me as I nodded. Yeah, I whispered. I did. And at that moment, I knew our story wasn't perfect. It was messy, complicated, painful, but it wasn't over. Not yet.